They walked around airports like staff. High visibility jackets, fake badges, perfect confidence. And while holidaymakers rolled their suitcases toward departures, these men calmly collected car keys, not to park the cars, but to make them disappear forever. What Britain didn't know was that behind those fake smiles was a £3 million criminal corporation that treated car theft like a business model. And tonight, you're going to see how their empire finally collapsed.
Part 1 begins long before the raids, before the arrests, before the headlines. It begins with ordinary families doing ordinary things, booking flights, parking their cars, trusting the staff at the airport. For most people, handing your key to a valet parking attendant is a simple exchange. You never question the high visibility vest, the clipboard, or the polite smile. But in the world of this crime syndicate, those symbols of trust became tools of deception. The criminals understood psychology, they understood routines, and they understood that if you want someone to hand over a £60,000 car, you don't need force, you just need to look official. The operation, known as the Company, wasn't loud, flashy, or chaotic. It didn't involve high-speed chases or dramatic robberies. Instead, it functioned quietly, like an invisible corporation with departments, managers, logistics teams, and profit targets. At the top was Asif Hussain, the man who treated stolen vehicles the way a business owner treats inventory. He used multiple phones, he used coded modes, and he kept track of each stolen car as if it were a shipment in a warehouse. To him, crime wasn't chaos, it was administration. For the victims, however, the experience was anything but organized. One father in Failsworth lived through the most terrifying moment of his life. It was around 11 p.m. when he heard the knock. Not the gentle knock of a neighbor or a delivery driver, but a hard, authoritative knock that sent a chill through the house. He opened the door and saw 3 masked men. One of them held a hammer. They didn't shout, they didn't threaten loudly. They simply demanded one thing: the keys to his Mercedes. His young daughter, hearing the commotion, came to the top of the stairs. She saw the men, she saw the hammer, she started crying. And in that moment, everything inside the father collapsed. He handed over the keys. The men walked away, and within 60 seconds, the Mercedes was gone, taken into the night, never to return. For him, it was trauma. For the company, it was simply another entry in their notebook, another unit acquired, another profit logged. But not every theft involved confrontation. In fact, the majority were based on deception rather than force. The criminals learned that appearing harmless was far more effective than appearing threatening. At airports across the region, they blended into the environment. They wore jackets that airport staff normally wear. They stood in the same spots legitimate employees do. They spoke with the confidence of someone who belongs there. And people believed them. Holidaymakers handed over expensive keys to men who vanished the moment the car was driven out of sight. They also used modern techniques to target keyless cars, but to protect your channel and comply with policy, we will not include or explain any technical crime methods. What matters is that the criminals exploited weaknesses in modern vehicle systems, not how they did it. These methods allowed them to steal high-value vehicles parked right outside people's homes, often without making a sound. Victims would wake up to an empty driveway, confused and terrified. Meanwhile, the stolen car was already being hidden, dismantled, or loaded for shipment. The industrial scale of the operation is what shocked investigators the most. In just a single year, between January 2020 and January 2021, the group stole 95 vehicles, worth over £3 million. Range Rovers, BMWs, Porsches, not random targets, but carefully selected based on resale value and international demand. Some of these cars weren't kept whole. Engines were removed and sent overseas in shipping containers labeled as industrial scrap. Inside those containers was the evidence of a global supply chain hidden behind forged documentation and false labels. But perhaps the most unbelievable part of the story isn't the thefts, the deception, or the international shipping. It's what they did when their business needed more money. Instead of slowing down, instead of reducing operations, they simply applied for government COVID relief loans, and they got them. Fake companies were registered, fake business activity was claimed, and the government, overwhelmed during the early months of the pandemic, approved £145,000 within days. Two of the group's key members, including Ibrahim Shafi, secured £95,000 in loans despite having dozens of previous convictions. To them, the loan system became another revenue stream. While criminals expanded their business, police were watching quietly. This case didn't break open because of a single dramatic moment. It broke open because investigators noticed patterns. Stolen vehicles appearing in clusters, communications from multiple phones connected to the same addresses, the same types of cars vanishing from airport parking lots, shipping containers leaving the UK with suspicious documentation. As each piece was added to the puzzle, the picture became unavoidable. This was an organized enterprise, not small-time thieves. By late 2020, law enforcement had a strong understanding of the structure. They monitored addresses linked to Hussein. They analyzed financial activity tied to the fraudulent COVID loans. They traced phone data showing communications between individuals involved in the logistics teams. They discovered coded notes, travel patterns, and links between various theft incidents. Slowly, quietly, they built a case sturdy enough to bring the entire operation crashing down. Part 1 ends with the police preparing for a large-scale takedown, coordinated raids, surprise entry teams, the seizing of documents and devices. At this point, the company had no idea how close the end was. They continued their operations, unaware that investigators had already mapped out their hierarchy, their routes, their buyers, and their warehouses. The empire they believed was invisible was now fully exposed, and the next chapter would bring everything to its breaking point.
They thought their airport scam was flawless. High-vis jackets, fake wale clipboards, and confidence strong enough to make anyone hand over their car keys. But one forgotten CCTV angle changed everything. Last time, we exposed how a group calling themselves The Company stole £3 million worth of luxury vehicles, posed as airport staff, and even used government COVID loans to fuel their criminal operation. Now, their downfall begins. The investigation didn't start with a dramatic raid. It began with a single Range Rover that disappeared from Manchester Airport. On CCTV, detectives spotted a man in a vest calmly taking the keys from a traveler who believed he was handing his car to official Valley staff. Days later, another identical case emerged. Same method, same attitude, same outfit. It was no longer random theft. It was organized crime hiding in plain sight. Officers enhanced footage and realized something crucial. The suspects never walked towards staff areas. They walked straight out of the airport. That confirmed the truth. This wasn't a rogue worker. This was a structured system pretending to be a legitimate airport service. Meanwhile, inside a quiet industrial unit in Greater Manchester, the real operation was running like a factory. Engines were removed within hours, chassis destroyed before sunrise, and luxury parts stacked for export. Everything was organized with the manners of a corporate business. Asif Hussain maintained the operation with the precision of a CEO. Multiple phones, coded notebooks, fake business records, import documents, and even a false dealership front. The police still didn't know him by name, but his invisible footprint was everywhere. Their breakthrough came when a holidaymaker became suspicious. One of the scammer's clipboards had a cheaply printed airport logo. The customer refused to hand over keys and alerted security. Airport staff flagged CCTV instantly. When detectives compared footage, it matched the earlier thief. That tiny mistake became the first thread police pulled to unravel the entire £3 million crime web. Surveillance intensified. Undercover officers followed suspects as they left the airport and drove towards unknown units. One night, police tailed a van right to a storage warehouse. Inside, they discovered stripped engines stacked on pallets, scrap chassis, removed trackers,
and containers labeled scrap metal that were actually filled with stolen parts destined for the Middle East, especially Dubai. Financial investigators then joined the case and made one of the most shocking discoveries. Two suspects had applied and received over £95,000 in government COVID relief loans, using completely fake companies. Another suspect, Asif, secured £145,000. The criminals weren't just stealing cars, they were funding their expansion using taxpayer money legally deposited into their accounts. Police now knew they weren't dealing with petty thieves, but an organized criminal corporation. So they waited for a perfect moment to strike. That moment came when two members used a relay amplifier to steal a BMW in less than 90 seconds, a technique that copies car key signals through walls. Officers were already watching them and captured the entire theft live through surveillance. Within hours, warrants were signed. At dawn, large teams launched coordinated raids across Greater Manchester. Doors were forced open, phones seized, vehicles recovered, and hidden ledgers were found. The same coded notebooks Asif kept like business documents. The case was now undeniable. This was an industrial-scale criminal enterprise disguised as a legitimate business. In court, prosecutors laid out every detail. The 95 stolen cars worth over £3 million, the fake companies, the exploited pandemic loans, the airport impersonation scam, and the international export routes. The group tried to argue they were small-time offenders, but the evidence exposed their real structure. Sentences were handed out across the network, with Asif receiving one of the harshest penalties. After years of silent, daily thefts, their empire collapsed. For the first time in a long time, travelers could hand over their keys at airports without fear. But their operation revealed a deeper truth. Modern cars, modern security systems, and even government funds can be exploited by criminals who appear completely legitimate on the surface. Their story serves as a reminder that organized crime doesn't always look like the movies. Sometimes it looks like a smiling valet worker holding a clipboard in an airport parking lot. अगर आपको ये पार्ट 2 पसंद आया हो तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दें। ये फ्री है और मुझे ऐसे ही सेफ, एजुकेशनल ट्रू क्राइम डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज बनाने में मदद करता है।